Hello and welcome to this new episode of Alive and Teaching. I do talk a lot about what we as teachers are meant to provide to our students and to transmit to them. But there is one other aspect that I think we should not overlook or forget about, which is what students do teach us. Because indeed, I think that while we are providers of something to students, what is also definitely very precious is the fact that students themselves, because of the generations that are part of, because of the different age also that they have, happen to have a world of theirs that brings us something in return. So what can we retain out of this? This is what we're gonna see together today. Let's go. So I think that the first thing that we can think of and be thankful for when it comes to our students is that they remind us of the importance of keeping grounded, meaning that there is something kind of paradoxical there when we are supposed to be the ones as teachers that come with the big ideas, that come with the theory, that come with the framework that we provide to students, but then you have this situation in the classroom where you happen to find or to see a student saying something, talking, pointing out something, and you say, wow, this is definitely bringing me back to earth. So there is, I think, something really that is key and that we should be aware of there, which is the fact that the world evolves, as we know, but evolves more and more rapidly. And this is where students can be a precious indicator of where we stand from perspectives and what we should not forget about. Some examples that come to my mind because they happen to me or because I've been facing them or experimenting them in my class could be the following. One example that I always think of and I give regularly to my students is the fact that some years back when I was speaking about terrorism, I was just saying what I naturally share with my friends and agree on with my friends or my colleagues in general, which is the following. We all remember what we were doing the day 9/11 happened and we learned about it. But actually, no, there is a point where I was just reminded of the fact that my students at that time barely had two or three years old, and even if you talk about it today, well, actually most of my students weren't even born when 9/11 happened. So this changed things. Why? Because this is where I have to integrate this into my reflection and into my way of speaking when it comes to talking to them about things that sound obvious to me, but at the same time there are things that they heard about. Of course, 9/11 is something that they've heard about from their parents. They know it's been around. They know it conditions part maybe of what they are experimenting today when it comes to the high security that they have in airports and so on and so forth. But at the same time, there is a need for us to be aware of the fact that the change that we've witnessed with 9/11, the change of habits, the change of the world around, is something that they happen to be born in, meaning what we consider to be have changed from point A to point B happens to be the point B or even the point C that they have been conditioned by or growing with. So this is where grounding happens to be something that I think I definitely take out of my students, and once again that I am very grateful for having them in order for them to remind me not only that they weren't born when 9/11 happened, but also that a thing that sounds as obvious as the shift in the realities of the world with the fall of the wall of Berlin and the crumbling of the USSR is also something that they weren't aware of before they learned it in school. There is a second point that I think is interesting and important and that pairs with the notion of keeping grounded, and it is the one related to humility. I think that with talking to students, knowing about their reality, their world, knowing about how they think, we have lessons of humility as teachers that are provided to us regularly and constantly even. Why? Because the fact of being grounded, I would say, pertains more to the intellectual dimension. The example of 9/11 that I've witnessed, I remember when I was sitting down when it happened and I weren't even born. But in change, when we talk about humility, we talk about something more spiritual, something also more related to our ego part. Because there is an ego part, of course, when it comes to teaching, providing knowledge, when it comes to kind of sometimes, I would say, making this kind of show where we bring this knowledge that we have and we put it there and we try and interact based on it, but knowing that we have lots of things that we have been witnessing and living before we bring it there. So this shared experience makes us feel sometimes maybe that we know more than many of them, and actually we know many things, yeah. But I'm also always struck by how students themselves happen to have a world of theirs where they know way more than I do, either on fields that are more interested in. That could be, for example, their interest for all what relates to things related, I would say, to the coding, to the games that are playing, to building even applications. That's one point that definitely they are very comfortable with, and I'm not so comfortable with, and this is where I'm always learning from them. But then the other part also is the fact that while we tend maybe to put ourselves in a category and to consider that they belong to another broad category, well, the fact is that no, they also have a world of theirs that happens to be also organized into different bits that we are not necessarily aware of when we take them from our position of teachers towards students. One example that will sound silly, but I think that it is telling. Me talking about Taylor Swift to my students and saying, okay, we know that you are all Swifties, and then them answering by saying, no, this is a thing, the Taylor Swift phenomenon is a thing of the young people. And I say, okay, you're 20 years old. What are you telling me then? And I would answer you by telling you, yeah, you know, it's the people that are 15 and 16 years old that are more the Swifties. So, silly example deep down, maybe, but at the same time, I would say that what I retained out of it, among many other examples that I could bring there, is the fact that if we keep in this equation where we consider that we are a category and they are a category that knows nothing about the world, let's say, and knows nothing about how things go, we would be on the wrong way. Why? Because we have things to learn the way they have things to learn, and I think that this interaction in itself is a good opportunity for us to just keep curious, or to keep our curiosity when it comes to what is happening on the other side, and to understand also that this same world that they live and that they happen to be conditioned by up to a certain extent is what we need to integrate, us, not only teachers but also people from another generation, if we want to keep the connection with them and to keep something that puts some trust in the middle of the relation and at the same time allows us to be in continuity with our duty, because this same humility that we learn through them is a way for us also to know how to, when needed, and I think that in many opportunities or in many situations it is needed, how to allow what has to be fixed in our way of approaching them to be fixed correctly. And then the third point I would put there is presence. Because through being grounded and with humility, I think that we are reminded of the fact that we are facing people, students, that contrary maybe to what we used to think before, or maybe to what my teachers used to think when it comes to my generation, people that are in the room have things to share, have things to say, and they're not only standing there or spending time without having anything to contribute to. On the contrary, what they say is something that we need to understand. The wonderings and even the questions that they bring are things that that need us to be present there to understand them well, and in some situations, if not to say many situations sometimes, to get us to have to make our own homework, meaning that if we don't understand this reality of the students well, if we are not present in the classroom connecting to what they are really today, the problem is that ourselves will take the strong risk of losing track little by little, if not in an accelerated way. This is where I think that what we have today in what we are witnessing, what I mean by today is this accelerated world that is destabilizing for many people, starting with us from another generation that was used to be experimenting a world that sounded more still. So what we have here is an opportunity through this presence to just learn about what is around. We don't have to end up being, of course, 20 years old guys that have the same habits. That's definitely not the point. But being present in the classroom and listening well to the students and understanding their needs as much as we can does not get us to have to abide by what they want, of course, but at least it allows us to be aware of these realities that are around and to avoid taking the risk of being these old school teachers that not only won't feel connected anymore to generations that are changing drastically, but also would be taking the risk of losing the respect and the attention of these same generations that we have a duty and that we have a task towards. This was it for today. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast or for watching it on YouTube or on Spotify. Please do follow us on social networks and or visit our website aliveandteaching.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter that is provided on a weekly basis and that announces, among other things, the next episodes or the ideas that are on the way. Take good care and see you very soon.